A personal experience. There comes a time in the life of a devoted writer when readers begin to send them letters filled with respect and admiration. Some praise the style of their writing, while others are captivated by the noble thoughts expressed in their works. The writer, too, has been fortunate enough to receive such letters lately, and the joy it brings to the heart can only be understood by another literary enthusiast. Sitting on his tattered blanket, the writer becomes engulfed in waves of pride and self-respect, forgetting the headache caused by cooking on damp wood the night before, or how the bedbugs and mosquitoes had robbed him of sleep. For a moment, the thought, "I am someone important," intoxicates him. Last year, during the monsoon month of Sawan, I received such a letter. It was filled with praise for my modest writings. The sender, a respectable poet himself, often had his poems published in various magazines. Reading the letter made me swell with pride, and I immediately sat down to reply. The content of that reply is now lost to memory, but I do remember that the letter was filled with expressions of love from beginning to end. Though I have never written poetry, I polished my prose as much as I could. When I read the letter again after finishing it, it felt like poetry. The entire letter was suffused with tender emotions. 5 days later, I received a second letter from the poet. It was even more touching than the first. He addressed me as "Dear Brother," and asked for a list of my works along with the names and addresses of my publishers. He added a personal note at the end: "My wife has great reverence for you and reads your works with love. She asks where you got married, how many children you have, and whether you have a photograph. If you do, please send it. Also, she inquired about your birthplace and family background." This letter, especially the last part, filled me with delight. It was the first time I had the honor of hearing my praise from a woman's lips, even if it was through her husband. I was overcome with pride. "Thank you, God," I thought. "Now even women have started to appreciate my work." I immediately wrote back, using all the most pleasing words I could remember. The letter was filled with affection and brotherhood. I described my family lineage, embellishing it far beyond the truth. My grandfather, who was a manager for a small landowner, became the manager of a large estate. My father, who was a clerk in an office, became the head of that office. As for my own writings, though I couldn't exaggerate the number, I spoke of their importance, respect, and reach in such humble words that they barely concealed my pride. After this, I heard nothing for 2 weeks. I had hoped the bond would grow stronger, perhaps even that a poem praising me might be written. I began to feel disheartened by the silence, but fearing that the poet might see me as selfish or sentimental, I refrained from writing again. It was the month of Ashwan, late afternoon. The Ramalila festival was in full swing. I had gone to a friend's house, and we were playing cards when suddenly a gentleman arrived, inquiring after me, and sat down next to me. I had never met him before and was trying to figure out who he was and why he had come. My friends were exchanging knowing glances, as this gentleman did have a peculiar appearance: dark-skinned, short-statured, with pockmarks on his face, and no hair on his head. He wore a simple shirt, a garland of flowers around his neck, a mismatched pair of boots, and carried a thick book in his hand. I asked him his name. He replied, "My name is Umapati Narayan." I immediately embraced him. This was the same poet whose letters I had received. I inquired about his well-being, offered him some betel and cardamom, and then asked, "What brings you here?" He replied, "Come home with me, and I'll tell you everything. I went to your house, but they told me you were here, so I came looking for you." I stood up to leave with Umapati ji. As we stepped outside, one of my friends asked, "Who is this gentleman?" I replied, "He is a new friend of mine." My friend cautioned, "Be careful with him. He seems like a bit of a rogue." I defended, "You're mistaken. You always judge people by their appearance. But a person's worth lies in their heart, not in their clothes." My friend shrugged, "Well, you know best, but I'm just warning you." I didn't respond to him. I went home with Umapati ji, ordered some food from the market, and we began chatting. He recited several of his poems to me. His voice was sweet and melodious. Though I understood little of the poems, I praised them lavishly, exclaiming, "Wonderful," and "Bravo," as if I were the greatest poetry connoisseur in the world. In the evening, we went to see the Ramlila, and upon returning, I fed him again. Then he began to tell me his story. He was on his way to Kanpur to bring back his wife. His home was in Kanpur, and he was planning to start a monthly magazine. A publisher had offered him 1000 rupees for his poems, but he preferred to publish them serially in a magazine and then print them as a book at his own expense. He also had some land in Kanpur but had grown to dislike the life of a landlord. His wife was the headmistress of a girls' school. We talked until midnight, and though I don't remember much of the conversation, I do recall that we had outlined a plan for our lives together. I felt incredibly lucky that God had sent me such a true friend without any effort on my part. We finally went to bed after midnight. Umapati ji had to catch an 8 a.m. train the next day. When I woke up, it was already 7 o'clock. Umapati ji was ready and waiting, having washed his face and hands. He said, "I must take my leave now. I'm sorry to inconvenience you. I was awake since 2 a.m., worried I might oversleep and miss the train." In the train, I started dozing off and took off my coat to rest. When I woke up at Mughalsarai, the coat was gone. I looked everywhere but couldn't find it. Someone must have stolen it. I had 50 rupees in the coat for expenses, and now they're gone too. Could you please lend me 50 rupees? I need to buy some clothes and other things to take to my in-laws' house. You know how expensive these things can get. I'll return the money on my way back. I was in a difficult position. I had been tricked once before and was instantly suspicious that I might be fooled again. But then I felt ashamed of my distress. Not everyone in the world is the same. This poor man was in a difficult situation, and here I was, doubting him. I went to my wife and asked, "Do you have any money?" She asked, "What do you need it for?" I explained, "My friend who came yesterday had his money stolen on the train. He needs money to bring his wife home. He'll repay it on his way back." With a sarcastic tone, she said, "All your friends come to you only when they need to swindle you. They're always in some kind of trouble. I don't have any money." I pleaded, "Please, give me some. The poor man is ready to leave, and his train will go without him." My wife threw the keys of the chest at me with annoyance and said, "You can argue your way into anything, but if only you had the sense to understand people, you'd have become a man by now. Go ahead, take the money and give it to him. But don't consider it a loan, just think of it as throwing money into the water." I wasn't interested in proving a point, I just wanted to help my friend. I quietly took the money, handed it to Umapati, and he left, promising to repay me on his way back. 7 days later, he returned in the evening, with his wife and daughter in tow. My wife welcomed them with sugar and yogurt, giving his wife 2 rupees as a gift and the same amount to his daughter for sweets. I expected Umapati to return my money as soon as he arrived, but he didn't mention it until late at night. When I went to bed, I said to my wife, "He hasn't returned the money yet." She laughed mockingly and said, "Did you really expect him to hand over the money as soon as he arrived? I told you before not to expect anything back. Just think of it as a donation to a friend in need. But you are an unusual man." I felt embarrassed and remained silent. Umapati stayed for 2 days, and my wife treated them with due respect, but I wasn't entirely satisfied. I felt as though he had deceived me. On the 3rd day, he was ready to leave early in the morning. I still hoped he would return the money, but when I heard his new tale, I was shocked. While packing his things, he said, "I'm very sorry, but I couldn't repay you this time. My father wasn't at home, he had gone to the village to collect taxes. I didn't have the time to go there myself since there's no train route, and you have to go by bullock cart. So, I stayed at home for a day and then went to my in-laws. I spent all the money there. If I hadn't received some farewell money from my in-laws, I wouldn't have made it here. Now, I don't even have enough for the train fare. Could you lend me another 25 rupees? I'll send it as soon as I get home." My first instinct was to give him a flat refusal, but I couldn't bring myself to be so rude. I went back to my wife and asked for more money. This time, she handed it over without a word. I handed the money to Umapati with an indifferent attitude. When his wife had descended the stairs, he took his bag, bowed to me, and I nodded in response. I didn't even bother to walk him to the road. A week later, Umapati wrote to me saying he was going to Berar for some work and would send the money on his return. 15 days later, I wrote him a letter inquiring about his well-being. There was no reply. Another 15 days passed, and I wrote again, reminding him of the money. No response. I even sent a registered letter, which undoubtedly reached him, but there was no reply. I realized that my clever wife had been right all along. Feeling disheartened, I kept quiet about the matter and didn't mention it to my wife either, and she didn't bring it up. The deceitful behavior of my poet friend had a profound effect on me, as it would on anyone. A noble and pure soul might have remained steadfast despite this betrayal, finding comfort in knowing they had done their duty. If the debtor didn't repay the loan, it wasn't my fault. But I wasn't that magnanimous. I toil for months, wear out my pen, and only then do I get to see the face of hard-earned cash. It was around this time that a new compositor from Bihar joined my office. He seemed skilled at his work, and I hired him at a salary of 15 rupees. He had previously studied in an English school but had dropped out due to the non-cooperation movement. His family refused to support him, so he had taken up this job to earn a living. He was about 17 or 18 years old, with a serious disposition, and he spoke politely. 3 days after his arrival, he fell ill with a fever. A few days passed, but the fever persisted, and he became worried. He missed his family and feared that even if they did nothing else, they would at least provide him with medicine. He came to me and said, "Sir, I'm ill. If you could lend me some money, I'd like to go home. I'll send it back as soon as I get there." He was genuinely sick, and I knew him well. I also knew he wouldn't recover if he stayed here. He really needed help, but I couldn't help feeling suspicious that he might disappear with the money. After all, if an intelligent, capable man like Umapati could deceive me, how could I expect this half-educated young man to keep his word? I was torn for several minutes before finally saying, "Brother, I feel very sorry for your condition, but I can't help you right now. I'm completely broke. I'm sorry." Hearing this cold response, tears welled up in his eyes. He said, "If you really wanted to, you could arrange something. I'll send the money back as soon as I reach home." In my heart, I thought, you may be honest now, but who knows if you'll remain so once you get home? And even if you do, what guarantee is there that you'll be able to repay me? There's no way for me to recover the money from you. But outwardly, I said, "I don't doubt your sincerity, but I'm sorry, I don't have the money. However, you can take whatever salary you've earned so far." He didn't reply. He looked up at the sky in despair and left. My heart ached, and I felt ashamed of my selfishness. But in the end, I stood firm in my decision. I consoled myself with the thought that I wasn't wealthy enough to throw money around like that. This was the result of the betrayal by my poet friend. Who knows what dire consequences this cruelty might have led to, but fortunately, that didn't happen. God saved me from this disgrace. As the young man walked away with tears in his eyes, he met one of my office clerks, Pandit Prithvinath. The Pandit listened to his story, and without a second thought, he handed him 15 rupees, which he had to borrow from the office cashier. When I heard about this, a weight lifted off my heart. The poor fellow would now safely reach home, and I had gained this satisfaction for free. I also felt a twinge of shame at my own meanness. I often wrote long articles preaching compassion, humanity, and good behavior, but when the time came, I had escaped the situation unscathed. And here was the humble clerk, who admired my writings, showing such generosity and kindness. I remained as sour as ever, while my disciple surpassed me in sweetness. Still, there was some ironic satisfaction in knowing that my teachings had affected others, even if they hadn't impacted me. The light of the lamp may not shine beneath it, but at least it spreads outwards. Yet, if the boy didn't return the money, and there was little hope that he would, I would be thoroughly humiliated. Then I'd have a good laugh at my own expense. However, this desire of mine was never fulfilled. 5 days later, the money arrived, and I've never had a more eye-opening experience. The good thing was that I hadn't told my wife about it, otherwise living at home would have become impossible. I wrote an account of this experience and sent it to a magazine. My intention was merely to present a picture of the consequences of deceitful behavior. I never dreamed it would have any practical effect. So when, on the 4th day, an unexpected money order for 75 rupees arrived, my joy knew no bounds. The sender was none other than Umapati. The coupon simply read, "Sorry." I took the money and handed it to my wife, showing her the coupon. She said indifferently, "Put it safely in your chest. I've only now realized that you're such a greedy person, that you chase after someone for a few rupees like this. This isn't gentlemanly behavior. When an educated and thoughtful person fails to keep their word, you should understand that they're helpless. To embarrass a helpless person with repeated demands isn't noble. No one who hasn't completely lost their moral compass deliberately deceives anyone. I won't keep this money until we receive a letter from Umapati explaining why it took so long for him to send it." But at that moment, I wasn't in the mood to listen to such noble thoughts. I was too happy to have recovered my lost money.
This story was originally written by Premchand, a legendary author of Hindi literature almost 100 years ago. Do let us know if you like the story.